75 years ago today, 156,000 Allied troops landed on 5 beaches at Normandy. They were supported by a huge array of people. The entire economies of the world had been at war since the end of 1941, and for most of Europe we'd been at war since September 1939. Total war, both sides determined to smash each other to extinction. And finally, the Allies landed in Europe. So come along with me and remember what our great-grandfathers and great-grandmothers and their parents did to ensure that we have the current world we have today. Over 425,000 Allied and German troops were eventually killed, wounded or went missing, which means dead, during the Battle of Normandy. This figure would include over 209,000 Allied casualties, with nearly 37,000 dead among the ground forces and a further 16,714 deaths among the Allied air forces. Compare this one small battle to the entire Vietnam War for America. Depending on who you believe, more than 31,000 US servicemen died in Vietnam during the entire war from 1961 onwards. Some say it's as high as 58,220. Over 200,000 American personnel were wounded during the war, physically wounded. The Allies landed in 5 beaches on Normandy. These were codenamed Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno and Sword. American troops landed at Omaha and Utah Beach. The British landed at Gold Beach and Sword Beach with Canadians, and also landed at Juno Beach. The chance of death was real. For paratroopers, they faced an odds of 1 in 4 of death. But over 50% of the men eventually survived from D-Day. Of course, they had to then go on and fight all the way to Berlin. Of course, landing under fire is not exactly a fun thing to do. There's estimates that about 2,500 and 3,000 other Allied troops died on D-Day purely by drowning. Of course, if you could, and you're American, land at Utah Beach, not Omaha Beach. The casualties at Utah were very light, about 197 dead with 60 of them missing. However, the US 1st and 29th Divisions suffered a total of around 2,000 casualties by landing on Omaha Beach. World War II fatality statistics are very hard to figure out, but it is reckoned that the war directly killed military and civilians at the rate of about 50 to 56 million people, which is like killing Canada or killing most of England. The estimated an additional 19 to 28 million deaths were caused by war-related disease and famine. That's as a minimum. So between 70 and 85 million people. Now if we hadn't invaded D-Day, maybe Russia would have eventually overwhelmed Germany. It probably would have done. Certainly would have done if we kept bombing and supporting them in economic and military ways that we were doing and engaging around everywhere but Europe. But at the time, I think it's important to remember, there was no thought of doing that. Russia was our firm allies. They were a firm ally against fascism. It wasn't a war of convenience, it was a war of death. Germany would, if it had won, eradicated our way of life and Russia's way of life, and probably a lot of Russians. The other thing I think is important to remember is that when we look back at things like this, if those German soldiers, if those Russian soldiers, if those Romanian soldiers, if they'd all said, no, we're not killing people, we're not invading a foreign country, because we're not going to get swept up into fascism and patriotism, or communism and patriotism, the world will be very different. Now, unfortunately, the majority of the people of the world still follow very much what their governments tell them to do, and will not say, no, you're an idiot. And while that continues, we will continue to have war. And as we all know, a third world war, might not be that much survivable. Well, who knows? Hopefully we won't get to that. Hopefully we've developed enough common sense at this point for the soldiers and the airmen and the sailors to say, I'm not fighting. I'm not firing on an enemy who's not fighting me. In other words, contained refusal to fight on the behalf of a safe government for political reasons might be the way forward, but we're a long way from that. But whatever, we really do need to look back, and we really do need to remember D-Day, June the 6th, 1944, 75 years ago, an awful lot of people died. An awful lot of people died getting those people to those beaches. Remember that the French resistance and the German resistance, and every country that was occupied had resistance, suffered appallingly. Entire villages were eradicated because of resistance. Eradicated, babies, women, children, men. It was a horrific war. War is always horrific, but we can choose to decline to attack other countries that aren't doing anything to us. If we surround them and embargo them and force them to fight, as what happened with Japan to some extent in 1941, war is inevitable. And the people who suffer in war are the people. Not the corporations so much, as long as they win, and not the governments, even if they lose. Nor the scientists who make the weapons. They tend to do okay as well. But we, the people, we get splattered. It's not a great thing, but it's very, very important that we remember D-Day. It was the single most important event in the Second World War to finally destroy Germany. The mainstream media is going to be full of this. It's going to have people laying wreaths and cenotaphs and stuff like that, and all soldiers being wheeled around, and I believe they're even doing a reenactment of the parachute drop on Normandy. It's important not to get caught up in the fact that we won. It's more important to get caught up in the fact that we suffered and died, and so did they. And at the end of the day, they became us. So I thank both sides in the war for their service. It wasn't easy for either side, and I do blame the governments for causing the war. There were ways out, there were things that could have been done differently. Human stupidity, greed and vengeance, when used as a political force, can destroy 70 to 85 million people over 6 years. And in 2019, it could be way, way more than that. Sobering stuff, but it's important to remember this without the hype and without the patriotism. People are people. People shot each other, blew each other up and died. It's not good. We should not ever, ever, ever go back to doing that.